So if you're really, really, really hoping to see the back end of the Liberals after the next federal election, a poll from Leger this week gave you some indigestion. It showed the Liberals under Mark Carney would be tied with the Conservatives under Pierre Poilievre. It seems crazy. Just as recently as last month, the Conservatives were more than 20 points ahead of the Liberals. And now this one poll shows that's all been wiped out. The Conservatives have come down, the Liberals have surged, the NDP have melted away. And the Liberals, because of the way their votes are concentrated, would win a majority government. Before that makes you too upset, though, before that gives you indigestion over the idea that after 10 horrible years under the Liberals, the incompetent Trudeau government, consider that Abacus, and those are my two favorite polling firms, Leger and Abacus, because they tend to be the most accurate. Abacus came out on February the 14th with a poll that shows the Conservatives are still 19 points ahead of the Liberals. And the race in Ontario, which Leger showed closing up, the race in Ontario is still strongly in the Conservatives' favor. West of Ontario, the Conservatives clean up completely. And even in Atlantic Canada, where Leger showed the Liberals surging under Carney, the Conservatives are still comfortably ahead. The Conservatives would still, under the Abacus numbers, win a very comfortable majority. So who do you believe? Well, let's take a look at the past. Cases where governments were extremely unpopular at the end of their tenure. They got new leaders. The new leaders looked like they were going to rebound that party. And yet the next time the voters had their say, they trounced the unpopular party. Two examples. One's in 1984 when John Turner took over from Pierre Trudeau, from Justin's father. Turner suddenly became very popular after he won. Pierre Trudeau had run, he'd outlasted his popularity. He'd worn people out with his sanctimony and his cleverness. And Turner looked like a good alternative. He'd been a finance minister. He'd been the last finance minister at that point to have balanced a budget. He was charismatic. He was good looking. And yet he was only prime minister for a little less than 3 months before he called an election. And in that election, Brian Mulroney and the Conservatives wiped the Liberals out. Now, Mulroney's the next example. He goes from 1984 to 1993. He's incredibly unpopular when he leaves. He's replaced by Kim Campbell. She gets this big bump in the poll. In fact, up to that time, Kim Campbell was one of the most popular prime ministers in recorded polling history in Canada. And she only lasted about 4 months. And then she calls an election. And we all know what happened then. The Conservatives were knocked down to 2 seats. So this popularity that leaders get when they replace an unpopular leader, and no leader in Canadian political history has been less popular than Justin Trudeau. When a new leader comes in and replaces an unpopular leader, there is often a big bounce in favor of that new leader, the new prime minister. But it doesn't last long. And the reason it doesn't last long is that once the thrill, the excitement of the leadership race is over, people start to look around and they say, yeah, but it's the same group of people behind that leader who are behind the previous leader. You have to look at some of the same ministers, be almost all the same MPs. They had goofy ideas under the old leader. It wasn't just the old leader who was the bad guy. It was the policies too. And then they start to say, well, nothing's really changed. There's a new leader, yes, and that new leader might have some better ideas, but it's still the same cast of characters that ran us into the ground for the previous 10 years. And I think that's what will happen this time. I think Mark Carney will win on March the 9th. I think there may be a short-term bounce for the Liberals. I don't think they will overcome the Conservatives, even with that bounce. And then as they govern for a little while and campaign for a few weeks, people will start to say, it's the same guys who are around Justin Trudeau. Why would we vote for them? And the bloom will come off that rose, just as it has in the past. So if you are hoping, as I am, to see the end of the Liberals at the next election, don't lose hope too much, just because there are one or two polls between now and then that show the Liberals rebounding a little bit. I think in the end, when people will go into the voting booths, they'll say, let's try something new. And they'll go with the Conservatives. For Post Media, I'm Lorne Gunter.